In the mists of the northern Mexican deserts, where ancient legends merge with historical memory, lies the birthplace of one of the most formidable empires ever to grace the Americas. The Mexica, whom we know today as the Aztecs, emerged from the harsh landscapes of what they called Aztlan, the mythical place of herons, a homeland shrouded in mystery, yet fundamental to understanding their imperial destiny. This is a story that spans centuries and continents, a tale of wandering nomads who would become lords of sun and sacrifice. I'm glad you're here for this journey through time. If you're enjoying what we're exploring together, a like and subscribe would mean the world to me. And I'm curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Drop your location and local time in the comments below. There's something magical about knowing we're all connected across different time zones, sharing these ancient stories, according to their own sacred histories, preserved in pictographic codices and oral traditions passed down through generations of priest historians. The ancestors of the Aztecs lived on an island in a great lake, somewhere in the northwestern reaches of Mexico. This primordial homeland, Aztlan, represented more than mere geography. It embodied the cosmic origins of a people destined to reshape the political and cultural landscape of Mesoamerica through military conquest, religious innovation, and administrative brilliance. The Mexica belonged to a larger cultural and linguistic group known as the Nahua, speakers of Nahuatl who shared common mythological traditions and social structures, while maintaining distinct tribal identities. These Nahuatl-speaking peoples had migrated southward over centuries, following complex patterns of movement that reflected both environmental pressures and opportunities for territorial expansion in regions offering better agricultural prospects and strategic advantages. Archaeological evidence suggests that the ancestors of the Aztecs lived as semi-nomadic hunter-gatherers who supplemented their subsistence through rudimentary agriculture, cultivating maize, beans, and squash in seasonal camps, while following annual cycles of movement that maximized their access to wild resources. Their material culture during this early period remained relatively simple, consisting primarily of portable goods, including ceramic vessels, textile implements, and weapons designed for both hunting and warfare. The harsh desert environment of their homeland shaped fundamental aspects of Mexican character that would later manifest in their imperial period, including resilience in the face of adversity, sophisticated understanding of resource scarcity, and appreciation for military prowess as essential for survival. The constant challenges of desert life created cultural values that emphasized endurance, courage, and collective cooperation, while developing practical skills in hunting, tracking, and desert navigation that would prove invaluable during their subsequent migrations. The social organization of these early desert communities created strong bonds of kinship and mutual obligation that would later serve as foundations for imperial administration and military organization. Survival in the desert required intense cooperation and shared responsibility, creating cultural patterns of collective decision-making and resource sharing that would influence Aztec political institutions throughout their imperial development. These early experiences with scarcity and cooperation established social mechanisms for redistributing resources and managing collective challenges that would later be scaled up to manage vast imperial territories. The development of distinctive religious practices during this early period reflected the particular challenges and opportunities of desert life, with deities associated with warfare, hunting, and survival receiving special veneration. The harsh realities of desert existence created religious frameworks that emphasized divine testing, warrior courage, and cosmic struggle between forces of order and chaos. These theological concepts would later evolve into the complex imperial religious systems that justified territorial expansion and ritual sacrifice as necessary obligations for maintaining cosmic balance and divine favor. The technological innovations developed during centuries of desert life included sophisticated weapon systems, portable shelter construction, and water location techniques that would prove essential during the Great Migration and subsequent imperial expansion. Desert peoples developed specialized knowledge of astronomy for navigation, understanding of seasonal patterns for resource exploitation, and social mechanisms for organizing hunting and warfare that would later be adapted to imperial military campaigns and territorial administration. The preservation of oral traditions during this early period maintained cultural continuity while adapting traditional narratives to reflect new experiences and changing circumstances. These stories served educational functions for young people while maintaining social cohesion and cultural identity during periods of environmental stress and resource scarcity. The emphasis on memorization and oral transmission created cultural mechanisms for preserving essential knowledge across generations while maintaining flexibility for adapting to changing conditions. The social organization of these early Mexica communities centered around kinship groups known as calpulli, extended families that controlled specific territories and resources while maintaining collective ownership of land and coordinated decision-making processes. These calpulli served both practical functions for organizing economic activities and symbolic functions for maintaining social identity and religious obligations that connected human communities with supernatural powers governing natural phenomena. The calpulli system represented one of the most sophisticated forms of social organization developed by nomadic peoples, creating flexible institutions that could adapt to changing environmental conditions while maintaining essential social cohesion and cultural continuity. Each calpulli maintained its own leadership structure, religious specialists, and territorial responsibilities, while participating in larger confederations that provided mutual support and coordinated activities during times of crisis or opportunity. These social structures would later evolve into the complex administrative systems that enabled the Aztecs to manage vast imperial territories containing millions of subjects from diverse cultural backgrounds. The development of craft specialization within early Mexica communities created the first professional distinctions that would later characterize imperial society, with some individuals focusing on weapon production, others on textile manufacture, and still others on religious activities and historical preservation. These early specialists maintained essential knowledge while developing techniques that would later enable the production of goods that impressed Spanish conquistadors through their beauty and technical excellence. Trade relationships developed during this early period connected the Mexica with other nomadic groups and established populations, creating commercial networks that provided access to materials not available in their homeland territories, while establishing diplomatic relationships that facilitated later territorial expansion. These trading activities required specialized knowledge about routes, products, and cultural differences, while developing negotiation skills that would later prove essential for imperial administration and diplomatic relations. The environmental challenges of desert life created innovative solutions for water management, food preservation, and shelter construction that would later influence imperial engineering projects and urban planning. Desert peoples developed sophisticated understanding of hydrology, seasonal patterns, and resource conservation that would prove essential when they established cities in challenging lacustrine environments and managed agricultural systems that supported millions of people. The military traditions that developed during this period emphasized individual courage, collective coordination, and strategic thinking that would later characterize Aztec Imperial armies. Desert warfare required different tactics and weapons than the conflicts that would characterize their imperial period, but the fundamental principles of military organization, leadership, and logistics developed during centuries of nomadic life provided foundations for later military innovations that enabled small Mexican forces to conquer vast territories. Religious beliefs during this formative period established fundamental concepts that would later characterize Aztec imperial ideology, including devotion to Huitzilopochtli, the war god who served as the patron deity of the Mexica people. According to sacred narratives preserved in later codices, Huitzilopochtli guided the Mexican migrations and promised them dominion over vast territories if they remained faithful to his commands and performed appropriate ritual obligations. The legendary departure from Aztlan, traditionally dated to around 1111 CE, marked the beginning of a transformative journey that would last over 2 centuries and ultimately lead to the establishment of one of the most powerful empires in pre-Columbian America. This migration was understood not merely as geographical movement, but as fulfillment of divine prophecy that required the Mexica to seek their promised homeland, where they would establish a great city destined to rule over all other peoples. The preservation of migration narratives in Aztec historical consciousness demonstrates the importance of origin stories for legitimizing political authority and cultural identity. These accounts, recorded in documents like the Codex Boturini and other pictographic manuscripts, provide detailed chronologies of the journey while incorporating mythological elements that explain the divine selection of the Mexica as chosen people destined for imperial greatness. Early Mexica material culture reveals technological knowledge that would prove crucial during their later imperial expansion, including sophisticated understanding of metallurgy, textile production, and ceramic manufacture. Their weapons technology, particularly their development of effective projectile weapons and defensive equipment, enabled them to compete successfully with other migrating groups while establishing their reputation as formidable warriors even before reaching central Mexico. The tribal structure that governed Mexica society during the migration period established patterns of leadership and decision-making that would later evolve into the complex imperial administration that characterized Aztec rule at its height. Early leaders combined military, religious, and administrative functions while maintaining accountability to Calpulli assemblies that represented community interests and traditional values. Trade relationships developed during the migration period connected the Mexica with other Nahuatl-speaking groups and established commercial networks that would later serve imperial expansion and economic integration. These early trading activities provided access to exotic materials and technological innovations while creating diplomatic relationships that facilitated territorial expansion and cultural exchange. The environmental knowledge accumulated during centuries of movement through diverse ecological zones provided the Mexica with sophisticated understanding of agricultural techniques, resource management, and territorial control that would prove essential during their later imperial expansion. Their ability to adapt to different environmental conditions while maintaining cultural continuity demonstrated remarkable flexibility and resilience that characterized their approach to imperial administration. The Great Southward Migration of the Mexica people represents one of the most remarkable journeys in human history, spanning over a century of movement through diverse landscapes and complex political territories as they sought the promised homeland revealed through divine prophecy and priestly interpretation of supernatural signs. This epic journey transformed a relatively small tribal group into a politically sophisticated people capable of establishing imperial dominance over central Mexico. The migration route, reconstructed from pictographic chronicles and archaeological evidence, followed a generally southward trajectory that took the Mexica through the modern Mexican states of Nayarit, Jalisco, Guanajuato, and Michoacán before entering the Valley of Mexico. This journey involved numerous stops at temporary settlements where the migrants established shrines, conducted religious ceremonies, and negotiated relationships with established populations who controlled territories along their route. The physical challenges of this epic journey cannot be overstated, covering over 1,000 miles of diverse terrain, including deserts, mountains, forests, and river valleys, while maintaining group cohesion, protecting women and children, and carrying essential possessions and sacred objects. The Mexica developed sophisticated strategies for long-distance travel that included advanced scouting, resource caching, defensive formations, and diplomatic protocols for negotiating passage through territories controlled by other peoples. These travel techniques required detailed planning, flexible adaptation to changing conditions, and strong leadership that could maintain morale during difficult periods. The seasonal timing of migration movements reflected sophisticated understanding of climatic patterns, resource availability, and agricultural cycles that enabled the Mexica to take advantage of favorable conditions while avoiding periods of scarcity or extreme weather. Migration planners had to coordinate the movements of thousands of people with the availability of water sources, wild foods, and temporary shelter while ensuring adequate time for rest, religious observances, and social activities that maintained group cohesion and cultural identity. The preservation of cultural identity during this prolonged journey required constant attention to educational activities, religious practices, and social relationships that maintained Mexican distinctiveness while adapting to new environments and cultural contexts. Elders and religious specialists played crucial roles in maintaining oral traditions, conducting ceremonies, and resolving disputes that might otherwise have led to group fragmentation or cultural assimilation with other populations encountered along the route. The integration of new knowledge and techniques acquired during the migration created cultural synthesis that combined traditional Mexica practices with innovations learned from other peoples, resulting in enhanced capabilities that would later contribute to imperial success. The migrants learned new agricultural techniques, craft skills, military strategies, and political concepts, while maintaining their essential cultural identity and religious obligations to Huitzilopochtli. The diplomatic challenges of migration required sophisticated negotiations with established populations who controlled territories, resources, and trade routes that the Mexican needed to access during their journey. These negotiations often involved exchanges of goods, services, or military assistance, while establishing temporary alliances that provided mutual benefits without compromising the migrants' ultimate goal of reaching their promised homeland. The skills developed during these diplomatic encounters would later prove essential for imperial expansion and administrative effectiveness. The religious significance of specific stopping places along the migration route created sacred geography that connected the Mexica journey with cosmic geography and divine intentions, transforming geographical movement into spiritual pilgrimage that fulfilled ancient prophecies while preparing the people for their imperial destiny. Sacred sites established during the migration became pilgrimage destinations that maintained cultural connections across vast territories while providing focal points for religious activities and historical commemoration. Huitzilopochtli served as the divine guide throughout this journey, communicating with Mexica priests through dreams, omens, and ritual divination, that provided specific instructions about routes, stopping places, and appropriate conduct during their travels. The gods' guidance was understood as essential for maintaining group cohesion and ensuring successful completion of their sacred mission to establish a great city in their promised homeland. The migration chronicles preserved in documents like the Historia Tolteca Chichimeca and various pictographic codices record specific events, genealogies, and territorial boundaries that demonstrate the historical accuracy underlying mythological narratives. These sources provide detailed information about interactions with other indigenous groups, environmental challenges overcome during the journey, and internal disputes that occasionally threatened group unity. During extended stays at locations like Coatepec, the Mexica developed more sophisticated social and political institutions while maintaining their essential tribal identity and religious obligations. These temporary settlements served as testing grounds for administrative innovations and military strategies that would later characterize their imperial system, including tribute collection, territorial control, and diplomatic relations with neighboring peoples. The role of priest leaders during the migration established patterns of religious authority that would persist throughout Aztec history, with specialized knowledge of calendrical calculations, ritual procedures, and divine communications serving as the foundation for political legitimacy and social organization. These religious specialists maintained the sacred bundles containing Huitzilopochtli's image and other ritual objects that embodied the spiritual essence of Mexica identity. Conflicts with other migrating groups and established populations created opportunities for the Mexica to develop their military capabilities while establishing their reputation as formidable warriors. These encounters involved not only armed conflicts, but also complex negotiations about territorial rights, resource access, and political relationships that required sophisticated diplomatic skills and strategic thinking. The gradual adoption of agricultural practices during the migration reflected the Mexica adaptation to different environmental conditions while maintaining their essential cultural identity. They learned intensive cultivation techniques from settled populations while contributing their own knowledge about hunting, warfare, and resource management that enhanced local economic systems and political relationships. Marriage alliances between Mexica leaders and members of established populations created kinship networks that facilitated territorial expansion while introducing new cultural elements that enriched Mexica traditions without compromising their essential identity. These strategic marriages demonstrated sophisticated understanding of political relationships and cultural integration that would characterize later imperial policies. The development of long-distance trade relationships during the migration connected the Mexica with commercial networks that extended throughout Mesoamerica, providing access to luxury goods, raw materials, and technological innovations, while establishing economic relationships that would later support imperial expansion. These trading activities required specialized knowledge about routes, products, and exchange systems that enhanced Mexica's political and economic capabilities. The preservation of oral traditions during the migration ensured cultural continuity across generations while adapting traditional narratives to reflect new experiences and changing circumstances. These stories served educational functions for young people while maintaining social cohesion and cultural identity during periods of stress and uncertainty. Environmental challenges encountered during the journey, including droughts, floods, and resource scarcity, tested Mexica's adaptability while providing opportunities to develop innovative solutions that would later characterize their imperial administration. Their success in overcoming these challenges demonstrated the effectiveness of their social organization and religious beliefs, while building confidence in their ability to fulfill their divine destiny. The approach to the Valley of Mexico marked the culmination of the migration journey, while presenting new challenges related to territorial control and political relationships with powerful established kingdoms. The Mexica entry into this densely populated and politically complex region required sophisticated diplomatic strategies and military preparedness that reflected their transformation from nomadic tribe to potential imperial power. The establishment of Tenochtitlan in 1325 CE represents one of history's most remarkable urban foundations, transforming a small marshy island in Lake Texcoco into the magnificent capital of an empire that would dominate Mesoamerica for nearly 2 centuries. The city's founding fulfilled ancient prophecies, while demonstrating Mexican ingenuity in adapting to challenging environmental conditions and complex political circumstances. According to Mexica sacred history, the site of Tenochtitlan was revealed through a divine sign promised by Huitzilopochtli, an eagle perched on a prickly pear cactus while devouring a serpent. This powerful image, which continues to adorn the Mexican flag today, symbolized the cosmic victory of solar forces over earthly powers and marked the location where the Mexica would establish their destined homeland and fulfill their imperial mission. The symbolic significance of this founding vision extended far beyond simple site selection, embodying complex theological concepts about cosmic order, divine authority, and human destiny that would influence Aztec Imperial ideology throughout their subsequent development. The eagle represented solar power, military prowess, and divine authority, while the serpent symbolized earthly forces, water, and fertility. The cactus, growing from a rock, demonstrated the potential for life and civilization to flourish in challenging environments through divine intervention and human determination. The practical challenges of establishing a major settlement on a small island in Lake Texcoco required innovative engineering solutions that would influence urban development throughout the imperial period. The Mexica had to develop techniques for expanding land area through artificial island construction, managing water supplies in a lacustrine environment, and creating transportation infrastructure that could connect their island city with mainland territories. These early engineering projects required coordinated labor, specialized knowledge, and substantial resources that demonstrated emerging organizational capabilities. The strategic advantages of the island location became increasingly apparent as Tenochtitlan developed into a major urban center, providing natural defenses against military attacks while controlling access to lake resources and transportation routes that connected different regions of the Valley of Mexico. The city's position enabled its residents to dominate lacustrine trade while maintaining independence from mainland political powers, who might otherwise have overwhelmed the small Mexica community through military force or economic pressure. The development of artificial agriculture, through Chinampa's construction, transformed the challenging lacustrine environment into one of the world's most productive agricultural systems, enabling Tenochtitlan to support population densities that exceeded those of most contemporary cities worldwide. These floating gardens required sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering, soil management, and crop rotation, while creating sustainable agricultural systems that could support urban populations without degrading environmental resources. The social organization that evolved in early Tenochtitlan balanced traditional Calpulli structures with new urban requirements, creating neighborhoods that maintained kinship relationships while adapting to the challenges and opportunities of city life. Urban Calpulli developed specialized functions related to craft production, trade, military service, and religious activities, while maintaining collective ownership of land and coordinated decision-making that preserve traditional social values within urban contexts. The religious architecture that emerged during Tenochtitlan's early period reflected both Mexican devotional priorities and their adaptation to lacustrine building conditions, with temple construction requiring innovative foundation techniques and water management systems. The early temples established ceremonial focal points for community religious activities, while serving as symbols of Mexican identity and divine protection in their new homeland. These structures provided spaces for conducting traditional ceremonies while adapting to urban conditions that required new approaches to religious architecture and community organization. Educational institutions established during this period created systematic approaches to preserving cultural knowledge while training young people for urban life and emerging political responsibilities. Schools attached to temples and clan centers provided instruction in religious practices, historical traditions, artistic techniques, and practical skills, while maintaining oral traditions that preserved essential cultural knowledge across generations of rapid social and environmental change. The emergence of craft specialization during Tenochtitlan's early development created professional categories that enhanced urban prosperity while establishing economic foundations for later imperial expansion. Skilled artisans working in textiles, ceramics, stone, and other materials developed techniques that produced goods of increasing beauty and technical excellence while supporting growing commercial relationships with other urban centers in the Valley of Mexico. The choice of an island location, while challenging from an engineering perspective, provided crucial strategic advantages, including natural defense against enemies, control over lacustrine resources, and access to the extensive trade networks that crisscrossed Lake Texcoco. The Mexica recognized these advantages while developing innovative solutions to overcome the logistical challenges of building a major urban center in a lacustrine environment. The initial settlement consisted of modest structures built on artificial platforms created through a combination of natural materials and sophisticated engineering techniques that the Mexica adapted from other lacustrine peoples in the Valley of Mexico. These early constructions demonstrated technical competence while providing foundations for the massive urban development projects that would transform Tenochtitlan into one of the world's largest cities. The political situation surrounding Tenochtitlan's foundation required careful navigation of complex relationships between established powers in the Valley of Mexico, particularly the Tepanec kingdom of Azcapotzalco, which controlled much of the region and demanded tribute from newly arrived peoples. The Mexica initially accepted subordinate status while quietly building their strength and developing the capabilities that would eventually enable them to challenge Tepanec dominance. Religious architecture established during the early decades reflected both Mexican devotional priorities and their adaptation to local architectural traditions and building materials. The first temple, dedicated to Huitzilopochtli, provided a focal point for community religious activities, while serving as a symbol of Mexican identity and divine protection in their new homeland. The development of chinampas, artificial agricultural islands created through sophisticated hydraulic engineering, enabled Tenochtitlan to achieve agricultural self-sufficiency while supporting rapid population growth. These floating gardens represented one of the most productive agricultural systems ever developed, yielding multiple crops per year while maintaining soil fertility through innovative composting and irrigation techniques. Social organization during Tenochtitlan's early period maintained traditional Calpulli structures while adapting to urban conditions and new economic opportunities created by lacustrine location and commercial relationships with established Valley of Mexico populations. These adaptations required innovative approaches to land tenure, resource management, and community governance that balanced tradition with practical necessity. The establishment of educational institutions during this period reflected Mexico's commitment to preserving cultural knowledge while training new generations in the skills necessary for urban life and political leadership. Schools attached to temples provided instruction in religious practices, historical traditions, artistic techniques, and administrative skills that would prove essential for imperial expansion. Military organization evolved rapidly during Tenochtitlan's early decades, as the Mexica developed specialized warrior societies, advanced weapons technology, and strategic doctrines that enabled them to compete effectively with established military powers in the Valley of Mexico. These military innovations reflected both traditional Mexica warrior culture and adaptation to new tactical requirements imposed by urban warfare and territorial conquest. Trade relationships established during this period connected Tenochtitlan, with commercial networks extending throughout Mesoamerica, while providing access to exotic materials, luxury goods, and technological innovations that enhanced urban development and cultural sophistication. Mexican merchants, known as Pocteca, developed specialized knowledge and diplomatic skills that supported both commercial activities and imperial intelligence gathering. The construction of causeways connecting Tenochtitlan with the mainland demonstrated advanced engineering capabilities, while providing essential transportation infrastructure that supported urban growth and commercial development. These massive construction projects required coordinated labor from thousands of workers, while reflecting sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering and urban planning principles. Population growth during the 14th century transformed Tenochtitlan from a small tribal settlement into a major urban center that attracted migrants from throughout central Mexico, while maintaining its essential Mexica character and political autonomy. This demographic expansion created new challenges related to housing, sanitation, food supply, and social organization that required innovative administrative solutions. The development of craft specialization during this period created distinct professional categories that enhanced urban prosperity while establishing the economic foundations for later imperial expansion. Skilled artisans working in feathers, precious metals, textiles, and ceramics developed techniques that produced goods of extraordinary beauty and technical excellence, while supporting growing commercial relationships with other urban centers. The Tepanec War of 1428 marked a pivotal transformation in Mexica history, converting them from tribute-paying vassals into the dominant power in central Mexico, while establishing the political and military foundations for imperial expansion that would create one of the largest empires in pre-Columbian America. This conflict demonstrated Mexican military capabilities while revealing their sophisticated understanding of alliance politics and strategic warfare. The Tepanec kingdom of Azcapotzalco had dominated the Valley of Mexico for over a century, extracting tribute from numerous subject peoples while maintaining political control through a combination of military intimidation and diplomatic manipulation. The Mexica had accepted this subordinate relationship since their arrival in the valley, paying regular tribute while building their strength and developing the capabilities necessary for eventual independence. The crisis that precipitated the war began with succession disputes in Azcapotzalco that created opportunities for subject peoples to challenge Tepanec authority while seeking new political arrangements that would enhance their autonomy and territorial control. The Mexica, under the leadership of their newly elected Huey Tlatoani, recognized this as the moment to assert their independence and establish themselves as a major regional power. Its caudal, whose name meant obsidian serpent, combined traditional Mexican warrior culture with sophisticated political acumen that enabled him to forge military alliances while maintaining domestic unity during the challenging transition from tributary status to imperial power. His leadership during the Tepanec War established patterns of royal authority and military command that would characterize Aztec imperial administration throughout its subsequent development. The formation of the Triple Alliance between Tenochtitlan, Texcoco, and Tlacopan represented a masterstroke of diplomatic innovation that enabled the Mexica to overcome Tepanec military superiority while establishing sustainable foundations for territorial expansion and political dominance. This alliance combined Mexican military capabilities with Texcocan intellectual sophistication and Tlacopan regional knowledge to create a formidable coalition capable of challenging established powers. Military innovations developed during the Tepanec War included new tactical formations, improved weapons technology, and specialized warrior training that enhanced Mexican battlefield effectiveness while establishing military traditions that would persist throughout the imperial period. These innovations reflected both traditional Mexican warrior culture and adaptive learning from contemporary military conflicts with other regional powers. The siege of Azcapotzalco demonstrated Mexican mastery of complex military operations while revealing their ability to coordinate large-scale warfare across multiple fronts. This campaign required sophisticated logistical planning, diplomatic coordination with allied forces, and strategic patience that enabled the Mexica to overcome well-fortified positions defended by experienced Tepanec warriors. The destruction of Tepanec power created opportunities for territorial expansion and tribute collection that would provide the economic foundations for Aztec imperial development. The redistribution of former Tepanec territories among the Triple Alliance partners established precedents for imperial administration, while ensuring that Tenochtitlan received the largest share of conquered lands and tributary obligations. Religious interpretations of the Tepanec victory emphasized divine support for Mexican imperial mission, while establishing ideological frameworks that would justify subsequent territorial expansion and tribute extraction. Huitzilopochtli's role in ensuring military success was celebrated through elaborate ceremonies that reinforced royal authority while demonstrating community gratitude for divine favor. The establishment of tribute systems immediately following the Tepanec victory provided essential resources for urban development, military expansion, and administrative growth that would characterize Aztec imperial development over the subsequent century. These tribute arrangements required sophisticated administrative systems for collection, transportation, and distribution of goods, while maintaining records that enabled effective imperial management. Social transformations accompanying the transition from tributary to imperial status created new opportunities for advancement within Mexican society, while establishing social hierarchies based on military achievement and administrative competence. The emergence of a professional warrior class and specialized administrative personnel reflected the growing complexity of imperial governance and territorial management. The burning of pre-conquest codices, ordered by Itzcoatl and his advisor Tlacaelel, represented a deliberate effort to reshape Mexican historical consciousness by eliminating records that portrayed them as subordinate people while creating new narratives that emphasized their destined role as imperial rulers. This historical revisionism demonstrated sophisticated understanding of the relationship between cultural memory and political legitimacy. Architectural projects undertaken immediately after the Tepanec victory, including the expansion of the Great Temple and the construction of new palaces, provided visible symbols of Mexican power while creating spaces for the elaborate ceremonies that would characterize imperial religious practices. These construction projects required massive labor forces and extensive resources that demonstrated both imperial wealth and administrative capabilities. The consolidation of the Triple Alliance under Moctezuma Iluwikimina marked the transformation of central Mexican politics from regional competition between city-states to systematic imperial expansion that would eventually encompass territories from the Pacific to the Gulf coasts. This period witnessed the development of administrative institutions, military strategies, and ideological frameworks that would characterize Aztec imperial rule at its zenith. Moctezuma Iluwikimina, whose name meant the angry lord who shoots at the sky, ascended to the throne of Tenochtitlan in 1440 CE, with a clear vision of territorial expansion and imperial consolidation that would establish Aztec dominance over Mesoamerica. His reign of nearly 3 decades created the institutional foundations and territorial extent that would define the Aztec Empire throughout its subsequent development. The alliance between Tenochtitlan Texcoco and Tlacopan evolved during this period into a sophisticated system of shared governance that balanced Mexican military dominance with Texcocan administrative expertise and Tlacopan regional knowledge. This collaborative arrangement enabled efficient imperial administration while maintaining stability through institutional checks and balances that prevented excessive concentration of power in any single center. Military campaigns during Moctezuma Iluwikimina's reign targeted strategic regions that would provide essential resources, control important trade routes, and establish defensive boundaries against potential enemies. These conquests were carefully planned operations that combined military force with diplomatic negotiation to achieve lasting territorial control, while minimizing the costs and risks associated with prolonged military occupation. The conquest of regions like the Toluca Valley, parts of Guerrero, and territories in modern Puebla demonstrated Aztec capabilities for conducting complex military operations across diverse geographical terrains, while adapting their strategies to local conditions and opposition forces. These campaigns required sophisticated logistical support, diplomatic intelligence, and tactical flexibility that reflected the professionalization of Aztec military institutions. Administrative innovations developed during this period created systematic approaches to tribute collection, territorial governance, and imperial communication that enabled effective management of vast territories containing diverse populations with different languages, customs, and political traditions. The creation of tribute lists, administrative hierarchies, and communication networks established bureaucratic foundations for imperial stability. The development of tribute systems during this period transformed the Aztec economy from primarily local exchange to imperial redistribution that concentrated enormous wealth in Tenochtitlan, while providing subject populations with access to goods and resources from throughout the empire. These systems required sophisticated record-keeping, transportation networks, and storage facilities that demonstrated advanced administrative capabilities. Educational institutions established during this reign created systematic training programs for imperial administrators, military officers, and religious specialists that ensured competent personnel for imperial governance while maintaining cultural continuity and institutional knowledge across generations. These schools, attached to temples and palaces, provided specialized instruction in law, history, military strategy, and religious practices. The construction of major hydraulic works during Moctezuma Iluwikimina's reign addressed critical urban infrastructure needs, while demonstrating imperial engineering capabilities to subject populations and potential enemies. Projects like the dike separating fresh and salt water in Lake Texcoco and the aqueduct supplying drinking water from Chapultepec enhanced urban livability while serving as symbols of imperial power. Diplomatic relationships established during this period connected the Aztec Empire with independent kingdoms throughout Mesoamerica, while creating networks of alliance and rivalry that would influence imperial strategy throughout the subsequent century. These relationships required sophisticated understanding of regional politics, cultural differences, and strategic opportunities that enhanced imperial security and commercial relationships. Legal innovations developed during this reign created systematic approaches to imperial justice that balanced local customs with imperial requirements, while establishing appeals processes and administrative oversight that enhanced governmental legitimacy. The codification of laws, establishment of courts, and training of judges created institutional frameworks that supported imperial stability and social order. Religious developments during this period emphasized the imperial dimensions of Aztec ceremonial practices while maintaining traditional devotional obligations and community religious activities. The expansion of major festivals, construction of new temples, and elaboration of ritual procedures reflected imperial wealth, while reinforcing ideological foundations for territorial expansion and tribute collection. Artistic patronage during Moctezuma Ilwikamina's reign supported the creation of magnificent works that celebrated imperial achievements while establishing aesthetic standards that influenced artistic production throughout the empire. Royal sponsorship of sculptors, painters, featherworkers, and other skilled artisans created cultural expressions that enhanced imperial prestige while preserving traditional artistic knowledge and techniques. Tlacaelel, the remarkable royal advisor who served multiple Aztec rulers across 4 decades, stands as one of history's most influential political theorists and imperial architects, creating the ideological foundations and administrative systems that transformed the Mexica from regional power into masters of Mesoamerica. His comprehensive vision of imperial purpose and divine mandate established cultural frameworks that would define Aztec civilization until the Spanish conquest. Born into the royal family but choosing administrative service over rulership, Tlacaelel wielded enormous influence through his roles as supreme judge, military strategist, and chief counselor to successive Huey Tlatoc. His decision to refuse the throne when offered demonstrated his understanding that effective power could be exercised more completely through advisory positions that avoided the ceremonial constraints and political vulnerabilities associated with royal status. The ideological revolution, orchestrated by Tlacaelel, fundamentally altered Mexica's understanding of their historical mission and cosmic responsibility, transforming their tribal identity into imperial destiny through systematic reinterpretation of religious beliefs, historical narratives, and cultural practices. This transformation required sophisticated manipulation of cultural memory and religious authority that demonstrated remarkable understanding of the relationship between ideology and political power. The elevation of Huitzilopochtli to supreme status within the Aztec pantheon reflected Tlacaelel's vision of imperial religious unity that would transcend local loyalties while providing divine justification for territorial expansion and tribute extraction. This religious innovation required careful balance between honoring traditional deities and establishing new theological hierarchies that supported imperial authority without alienating subject populations. The institution of continuous warfare, as both military strategy and religious obligation, created the famous Flowery Wars that provided prisoners for sacrifice while maintaining warrior training and social mobility within the imperial system. Tlacaelel understood warfare as essential for imperial vitality, providing both material benefits through conquest and spiritual benefits through ritual combat that honored the gods while strengthening military capabilities. The development of elaborate sacrifice rituals during this period transformed traditional religious practices into imperial spectacles that demonstrated Aztec power while maintaining cosmic balance through offerings of human blood to nourish the gods. These ceremonies served multiple functions, including religious devotion, political demonstration, and social integration that reinforced imperial authority while satisfying spiritual requirements. Administrative reforms implemented under Tlacaelel's guidance created systematic approaches to imperial governance that balanced central authority with local autonomy while ensuring efficient tribute collection and territorial control. His understanding of administrative complexity enabled the empire to manage diverse populations across vast territories while maintaining political stability and economic prosperity. The creation of imperial historical narratives under Tlacaelel's direction involved systematic revision of traditional accounts to emphasize Mexican destiny and divine selection, while minimizing references to their humble origins and tributary status. This historical reconstruction required sophisticated understanding of cultural memory and political legitimacy that demonstrated the importance of controlling narratives for maintaining imperial authority. Legal innovations developed during this period established systematic approaches to imperial justice that recognized local customs while enforcing imperial requirements and maintaining social order across diverse populations. Tlacaelel's legal philosophy balanced flexibility with consistency, creating frameworks that could accommodate cultural differences while ensuring imperial unity and administrative effectiveness. Economic policies implemented under Tlacaelel's influence transformed tribute collection from simple resource extraction into sophisticated redistribution systems that enhanced imperial wealth, while providing subject populations with access to goods and services that improved their living standards. These policies recognized that sustainable imperial rule required benefits for subjects as well as rulers. Educational innovations promoted during this period created systematic training programs for imperial personnel while preserving and transmitting cultural knowledge that would maintain imperial institutions across generations. Tlacaelel understood education as essential for imperial continuity, ensuring that future administrators, priests, and military leaders possessed the knowledge and skills necessary for effective governance. The patronage of arts and crafts during Tlacaelel's influence created distinctive imperial artistic traditions that celebrated Aztec achievements while maintaining high aesthetic standards that enhanced imperial prestige. His understanding of art as political communication enabled the creation of visual programs that reinforced imperial messages while preserving traditional artistic excellence. Military innovations developed under Tlacaelel's guidance created professional warrior institutions that enhanced battlefield effectiveness while providing social advancement opportunities that maintained loyalty and motivation within imperial society. His military philosophy emphasized both tactical superiority and psychological warfare that enhanced Aztec reputation while reducing the costs of territorial conquest. The reigns of Axayacatl, Tizoc, and Huitzot represented the military zenith of Aztec imperial expansion, creating warrior institutions and conquest strategies that extended imperial control from the tropical lowlands of the Gulf Coast to the Pacific shores of modern Guerrero, while establishing military traditions that would define Aztec culture until the Spanish conquest. This period witnessed the transformation of warfare from mere territorial expansion into sacred obligation that maintained cosmic balance while providing social advancement for warrior classes. Axia-Catl's reign, 1469 to 1481, initiated this military golden age through campaigns that consolidated Aztec control over the Valley of Mexico, while extending imperial influence into regions that had previously maintained independence or nominal allegiance. His military innovations included specialized warrior training programs, advanced weapons technology, and tactical formations that enhanced battlefield effectiveness while establishing imperial military traditions. The conquest of Tlatelolco in 1473 eliminated the last independent power within Lake Texcoco, while incorporating its sophisticated commercial networks and skilled craftsmen into the imperial system. This victory required complex urban warfare techniques and demonstrated Aztec capabilities for conducting military operations in challenging environments while maintaining civilian support and economic continuity. Military campaigns against the Tarascan kingdom, while ultimately unsuccessful, demonstrated both the extent of Aztec ambitions and the limits of imperial expansion when confronting well-organized opposition with advanced military technology. These conflicts revealed the importance of technological innovation and strategic adaptation, while highlighting the challenges of extending imperial control over culturally distinct populations. Tezoc's brief reign, 1481 to 1486, focused on consolidating previous conquests, while developing administrative systems that could effectively manage vast territories containing diverse populations with different languages, customs, and political traditions. His emphasis on imperial administration over territorial expansion reflected understanding that sustainable empire required effective governance as well as military conquest. Ahuitzotli's reign, 1486 to 1502, marked the peak of Aztec territorial expansion, extending imperial control deep into Guatemala while consolidating dominance over regions that would provide essential resources for imperial prosperity. His military campaigns demonstrated sophisticated logistical capabilities and strategic planning that enabled successful operations across vast distances and challenging geographical terrain. The development of professional warrior societies during this period created institutionalized military hierarchies that provided social advancement opportunities while maintaining high standards for combat effectiveness and loyalty to imperial authority. The Eagle and Jaguar warrior societies established exclusive organizations that enhanced military esprit de corps while creating social distinctions based on battlefield achievement rather than birth. Military technology innovations during this period included improved projectile weapons, protective armor, and siege techniques that enhanced Aztec battlefield superiority while maintaining traditions of individual combat that honored warrior culture and provided opportunities for demonstrating personal courage and skill. These technological advances reflected both indigenous innovation and adaptation of techniques learned from conquered peoples. The establishment of military garrisons throughout the empire created permanent Aztec presence in conquered territories, while providing security for tribute collection and imperial administration. These military installations served both strategic functions for territorial control and cultural functions for spreading Aztec influence while maintaining communication networks that connected imperial periphery with central command. Tribute systems developed during this period transformed military conquest into economic benefit through systematic extraction of resources, manufactured goods, and luxury items that enhanced imperial wealth, while providing subject populations with access to trade networks and technological innovations. These systems required sophisticated administrative capabilities and transportation infrastructure that demonstrated imperial organizational competence. The integration of conquered warriors into imperial military forces created opportunities for demonstrating loyalty while utilizing local military knowledge and territorial familiarity that enhanced imperial effectiveness. This inclusive approach to military organization balanced imperial control with local participation while maintaining cultural diversity within unified command structures. Military festivals and ceremonies during this period celebrated warrior achievements, while reinforcing ideological foundations for continued expansion and sacrifice. These events provided opportunities for displaying captured enemies, distributing military honors, and demonstrating imperial power while maintaining religious obligations and social cohesion that supported military effectiveness. The development of military intelligence networks during this period enabled effective strategic planning while providing early warning of potential threats and opportunities for territorial expansion. These intelligence systems utilized merchants, diplomats, and religious personnel to gather information while maintaining security protocols that protected imperial interests and military advantages. The reign of Moctezuma Xocoyotzin, known to history as Moctezuma II, represented the absolute zenith of Aztec imperial power, presiding over a vast empire that stretched from coast to coast, while commanding tribute from millions of subjects and maintaining one of the world's most magnificent capital cities. His 18-year reign would witness both the greatest achievements of Aztec civilization and the beginning of its catastrophic encounter with Spanish conquistadors. Moctezuma's accession to the throne in 1502 followed established protocols for royal selection that emphasized military achievement, administrative competence, and religious knowledge while ensuring continuity of imperial institutions and policies. His selection by the ruling council reflected confidence in his ability to maintain imperial prosperity, while addressing emerging challenges from both internal dissent and external threats to territorial integrity. The imperial court that surrounded Moctezuma represented unprecedented levels of luxury, sophistication, and ceremonial complexity that impressed both indigenous allies and eventual Spanish conquistadors through its elaborate protocols, magnificent architecture, and displays of imperial wealth. This court culture reflected imperial prosperity while serving practical functions for diplomatic relations, administrative coordination, and cultural integration throughout the empire. Territorial administration under Moctezuma's reign achieved remarkable sophistication through systematic tribute collection, efficient communication networks, and effective provincial governance that maintained imperial unity while accommodating local customs and political traditions. The empire during this period encompassed approximately 80,000 square miles and included between 15 and 25 million subjects, representing dozens of distinct cultural and linguistic groups. Military campaigns during Moctezuma's reign focused on consolidating previous conquests while extending imperial influence into remaining independent territories that could provide strategic advantages or essential resources. These operations demonstrated continued Aztec military superiority while revealing growing challenges related to distance, logistics, and local resistance that would complicate imperial expansion. Economic prosperity during this period reached unprecedented levels through efficient tribute collection, extensive trade networks, and specialized craft production that created wealth concentrations in Tenochtitlan while maintaining economic relationships throughout Mesoamerica. The imperial economy included sophisticated systems for resource distribution, currency exchange, and commercial regulation that supported both urban populations and rural producers. Religious activities during Moctezuma's reign emphasized imperial dimensions of Aztec ceremonial practices, while maintaining traditional devotional obligations and community religious activities. The completion of major temple reconstructions, elaboration of festival cycles, and expansion of sacrificial ceremonies reflected imperial wealth, while reinforcing ideological foundations for territorial expansion and tribute collection. Urban development in Tenochtitlan during this period created one of the world's largest and most sophisticated cities, featuring elaborate palace complexes, extensive market systems, advanced hydraulic infrastructure, and architectural monuments that impressed visitors through their scale, beauty, and technological accomplishment. The city's population during Moctezuma's reign probably exceeded 200,000 inhabitants, making it larger than most contemporary European cities. Diplomatic relationships maintained during this period connected the Aztec Empire with independent kingdoms throughout Mesoamerica, while creating networks of alliance and rivalry that influenced imperial strategy and commercial relationships. These diplomatic activities required sophisticated understanding of regional politics, cultural protocols, and strategic opportunities that enhanced imperial security while maintaining beneficial trade relationships. Artistic patronage during Moctezuma's reign supported unprecedented creativity and technical excellence in sculpture, painting, featherwork, and other luxury crafts that celebrated imperial achievements while maintaining traditional aesthetic standards. Royal workshops produced magnificent works that served both ceremonial functions and diplomatic purposes, while establishing artistic traditions that influenced production throughout the empire. The education system that flourished during this period created sophisticated institutions for training imperial administrators, military officers, and religious specialists, while preserving cultural knowledge and maintaining institutional continuity. These schools, attached to major temples and palace complexes, provided specialized instruction that ensured competent personnel for imperial governance while maintaining cultural traditions across generations. Social hierarchy during Moctezuma's reign reached its most elaborate development, creating distinct classes with specific privileges, obligations, and advancement opportunities that maintained social order while providing motivation for service to imperial interests. This social system balanced hereditary status with meritocratic advancement while ensuring that essential functions were performed by qualified personnel. The market system that operated in Tenochtitlan and other major cities during this period created one of the world's most sophisticated commercial institutions, featuring standardized currencies, regulated exchanges, and quality controls that facilitated trade while maintaining consumer protection and governmental revenue collection. The Great Market of Toltei reportedly served over 60,000 customers daily and offered goods from throughout Mesoamerica. The religious worldview that sustained Aztec imperial expansion and social organization represented one of humanity's most complex theological systems, integrating multiple deities, elaborate ceremonial cycles, and sophisticated cosmological concepts that connected earthly activities with divine purposes while providing meaning and structure for millions of people throughout the empire. The Aztec pantheon included hundreds of deities representing different aspects of natural phenomena, human activities, and cosmic forces, with major gods like Tezcatlipoca, Quetzalcoatl, Tlaloc, and Huitzilopochtli serving specialized functions within integrated theological systems that addressed both universal concerns and specific community needs. These deities possessed distinct personalities, preferences, and areas of authority while participating in complex mythological narratives that explained cosmic structure and historical development. The complexity of Aztec religious beliefs reflected centuries of cultural development that incorporated influences from throughout Mesoamerica while maintaining distinctive Mexica characteristics and theological innovations. The pantheon included ancient deities inherited from earlier civilizations alongside newer gods that reflected Aztec imperial experiences and cultural synthesis with conquered peoples. This religious diversity required sophisticated theological frameworks for understanding relationships between different deities while maintaining coherent approaches to ritual obligations and ceremonial activities. The theological concept of duality permeated Aztec religious thinking, with most major deities possessing complementary aspects that represented different dimensions of cosmic forces and natural phenomena. This dualistic thinking enabled Aztec religious specialists to understand complex relationships between opposing forces while maintaining theological frameworks that emphasized cosmic balance and the necessity of ritual activities for maintaining proper relationships between human communities and supernatural powers. Regional variations in religious practices throughout the empire reflected local traditions and environmental conditions while maintaining fundamental theological unity through shared devotion to major imperial deities and participation in empire-wide ceremonial cycles. Provincial communities often maintained traditional deities alongside imperial gods, while adapting ritual practices to local conditions and cultural preferences, creating religious diversity within theological unity that enhanced imperial stability while preserving cultural distinctiveness. The training of religious specialists required years of intensive education in theological concepts, ritual procedures, astronomical knowledge, and historical traditions that enabled proper performance of ceremonial obligations while maintaining cultural continuity across generations. Priestly schools provided systematic instruction in complex religious knowledge while developing personal qualities of devotion, discipline, and spiritual insight that qualified individuals for religious leadership and community service. Religious festivals throughout the empire created occasions for community participation in imperial ceremonial cycles, while maintaining local traditions and cultural preferences that enhanced social cohesion and cultural identity. These festivals required extensive planning and resource commitment, while providing opportunities for artistic expression, social interaction, and spiritual renewal that reinforced both local community bonds and imperial loyalty. The integration of astronomical knowledge with religious practices enabled precise scheduling of ceremonies according to celestial events and calendar calculations, while demonstrating divine connections and supernatural authority of religious and political leaders. This astronomical precision enhanced religious effectiveness, while serving practical functions for agricultural planning and political scheduling that required coordination with cosmic forces and divine intentions. Pilgrimage traditions throughout the empire connected local communities with major religious centers while creating networks of cultural exchange and spiritual renewal that enhanced imperial unity while preserving regional distinctiveness. These pilgrimage activities required substantial travel and resource commitment while providing opportunities for cultural interaction and religious devotion that strengthened both personal faith and imperial identity. The preservation of religious knowledge through pictographic codices and oral traditions enabled continuity of theological understanding and ritual practices across generations, while adapting to changing political conditions and cultural circumstances. Religious texts preserved essential knowledge about deities, ceremonies, and cosmic relationships, while providing authoritative sources for resolving theological disputes and maintaining proper ritual procedures. Divination practices throughout the empire enabled religious specialists to interpret divine will and provide guidance for both individual decisions and community policies, while maintaining proper relationships with supernatural authorities. These divinatory techniques required specialized knowledge of calendrical systems, symbolic interpretations, and ritual procedures, while providing practical services that enhanced both personal welfare and community prosperity. The role of sacrifice in maintaining cosmic balance reflected sophisticated theological understanding of relationships between human activities and supernatural requirements, while serving practical functions for disposing of war captives and demonstrating imperial power. Sacrificial practices varied according to specific deities, ceremonial occasions, and regional traditions, while maintaining fundamental principles about divine nourishment and cosmic reciprocity that justified these activities within Aztec religious frameworks. The patron deity of the Mexica people embodied solar energy and military prowess, while serving as the divine architect of imperial expansion and territorial conquest. His mythological biography, involving miraculous birth and cosmic battles against forces of darkness, provided ideological foundations for continuous warfare, while establishing divine precedent for Aztec territorial ambitions and military obligations. Tezcatlipoca, the smoking mirror, represented change, conflict, and divine judgment, while serving as patron of rulers and warriors who navigated the dangerous complexities of political power. His association with jaguars, obsidian, and night emphasized the mysterious and potentially dangerous aspects of divine authority, while providing theological frameworks for understanding political success and failure. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, symbolized wisdom, learning, and cultural achievement, while serving as patron of priests, scribes, and craftsmen who preserved knowledge and created beautiful objects. His mythological associations with wind, Venus, and cultural innovation provided divine sanction for intellectual and artistic activities, while maintaining theological balance with more martial deities. Tlaloc, the ancient rain god, controlled agricultural prosperity and urban water supplies, while demanding elaborate ceremonies and sacrificial offerings that demonstrated community devotion and divine reciprocity. His prominence in Aztec religious practices reflected the fundamental importance of water resources for supporting large urban populations in the semi-arid environment of central Mexico. The concept of Teotl, often translated as divine force, represented the fundamental spiritual energy that animated all existence, while providing theoretical frameworks for understanding the relationship between material and spiritual realms. This concept enabled sophisticated theological discussions about divine presence in natural phenomena, while supporting practical religious activities that maintained proper relationships with supernatural powers. Cosmological beliefs about the structure of the universe positioned the earthly realm within complex systems of multiple heavens and underworlds that served as dwelling places for different categories of deities and deceased souls. The Aztec cosmos included 13 levels above the earth and 9 levels below, each associated with specific colors, directions, and supernatural inhabitants that influenced earthly events through their interactions and conflicts. The myth of the five suns described the cyclical creation and destruction of previous worlds, situating contemporary civilization within cosmic frameworks that emphasized both human achievement and cosmic fragility. According to these accounts, the current fifth sun would eventually end through earthquakes and cosmic catastrophe, creating theological urgency for maintaining divine favor through appropriate ritual activities and moral behavior. Calendrical systems integrated astronomical observations with religious requirements to create comprehensive temporal frameworks that guided both individual activities and community ceremonies. The sacred calendar of 260 days combined with the solar calendar of 365 days to create 52-year cycles that provided occasions for major renewal ceremonies while enabling precise scheduling of religious activities according to divine requirements. Sacrifice represented the central religious obligation that maintained cosmic balance through offerings of blood, hearts, and lives to nourish the gods and ensure continued solar movement, seasonal change, and agricultural productivity. These practices reflected theological beliefs about divine dependence on human offerings while serving practical functions for disposing of war captives and demonstrating imperial power to subject populations. The Great Temple of Tenochtitlan served as the cosmic center where earthly and divine realms intersected through elaborate ceremonies that reenacted mythological events while maintaining proper relationships between human communities and supernatural authorities. This architectural complex, rebuilt multiple times with increasing magnificence, represented the peak of Aztec religious architecture while serving practical functions for imperial ceremonies and priestly activities. Religious education created sophisticated institutions for training priests, maintaining ceremonial knowledge, and preserving theological traditions that ensured proper performance of divine obligations across generations. These educational systems required mastery of complex calendrical calculations, mythological narratives, and ritual procedures while maintaining oral traditions that preserved essential cultural knowledge. The Templo Mayor of Tenochtitlan stood as the architectural and spiritual heart of the Aztec Empire, representing cosmic structure through its design while serving as the focal point for the most important religious ceremonies that maintained divine favor and imperial legitimacy. This magnificent structure, rebuilt and expanded multiple times during the imperial period, embodied Aztec understanding of sacred architecture, while demonstrating the wealth and devotion of the world's most powerful indigenous American empire. The temple's pyramidal form replicated the cosmic mountain, where gods dwelt while providing artificial elevation that connected earthly ceremonies with celestial powers through its positioning between earth and sky. The structure's orientation to cardinal directions reflected astronomical knowledge while creating symbolic geography that situated Tenochtitlan at the cosmic center where divine and mortal realms intersected. The dual temples crowning the pyramid honored Huitzilopochtli, patron god of war, and the Mexica people, and Tlaloc, ancient god of rain and agricultural fertility, representing the two divine powers most essential for imperial prosperity and survival. This architectural program reflected theological understanding of the complementary relationship between warfare and agriculture, while providing appropriate spaces for ceremonies honoring both deities. Construction history of the Great Temple reveals 7 distinct building phases spanning over 2 centuries, with each reconstruction expanding the structure's size and magnificence, while incorporating architectural innovations and artistic achievements that reflected imperial prosperity and technological advancement. Archaeological investigations have revealed elaborate offerings buried within the structure, including thousands of objects from throughout Mesoamerica that demonstrate the temple's importance as a repository of imperial wealth. The temple complex included numerous subsidiary structures that served specialized religious functions while creating architectural settings for different categories of ceremonies and priestly activities. These included smaller temples dedicated to various deities, residential areas for religious personnel, and facilities for storing ceremonial equipment and sacrificial offerings that supported the complex religious activities centered on the main pyramid. Ceremonial activities conducted at the Great Temple included daily rituals performed by resident priests, seasonal festivals that attracted participants from throughout the empire, and special ceremonies marking important political events like royal accessions and military victories. These activities required elaborate preparations, specialized knowledge, and expensive materials that demonstrated both religious devotion and imperial wealth. The famous dedication ceremony of 1487, which reportedly involved the sacrifice of thousands of captives over 4 days, represented the most elaborate religious spectacle in Aztec history, while demonstrating imperial power to both subjects and enemies. This ceremony required months of preparation and enormous resources, while serving multiple functions including religious devotion, political demonstration, and social integration. Architectural symbolism embedded within the temple's design connected specific features with mythological narratives and cosmological concepts that reinforced religious messages while creating educational opportunities for participants in temple ceremonies. The temple served as a three-dimensional religious text that communicated theological concepts through spatial relationships, decorative programs, and ceremonial activities. The temple's role as cosmic center extended beyond Tenochtitlan to influence religious architecture throughout the empire, with provincial temples often replicating design elements and ceremonial programs that maintained theological unity while accommodating local traditions and preferences. This architectural influence demonstrated imperial cultural authority while providing frameworks for integrating conquered peoples into Aztec religious systems. Daily maintenance of the temple required large numbers of priests, servants, and specialists who performed various functions including ritual activities, architectural maintenance, and administrative duties that ensured proper operation of this complex religious institution. These personnel lived in associated residential complexes while maintaining specialized knowledge that enabled effective performance of their religious obligations. The temple treasury contained enormous wealth in the form of tribute offerings, ceremonial objects, and precious materials that reflected both religious devotion and imperial prosperity. These collections included elaborate featherwork, precious metals, rare stones, and exotic goods from throughout Mesoamerica that demonstrated the empire's ability to command resources from vast territories. Acoustic properties of the temple complex enhanced ceremonial activities through architectural features that amplified ritual sounds while creating appropriate atmospheric effects for religious performances. The structure's design enabled effective communication between priests and large audiences, while maintaining appropriate reverence for sacred activities. Urban planning in Tenochtitlan reflected sophisticated understanding of hydraulic engineering, population management, and commercial organization, while creating residential neighborhoods that balanced privacy with community interaction. The city's layout featured broad canals that served transportation and commercial functions while providing access to residential areas organized around local temples and markets that served neighborhood needs. Life in Tenochtitlan during its imperial zenith represented one of history's most remarkable urban experiences, combining sophisticated infrastructure with cultural diversity, while providing residents with amenities and opportunities that rivaled or exceeded those available in contemporary cities anywhere in the world. The city's unique lacustrine environment, combined with innovative engineering and administrative systems, created urban conditions that supported hundreds of thousands of inhabitants while maintaining high standards of health, safety, and cultural sophistication. Housing in the imperial capital varied dramatically according to social status, with royal palaces featuring elaborate courtyards, gardens, and specialized facilities, while common people lived in more modest structures that nonetheless provided adequate shelter and privacy for family life. Even humble residences often included courtyards, storage areas, and spaces for craft production that enabled families to participate in the city's complex economy. The social hierarchy that characterized Tenochtitlan created distinct classes with specific privileges, obligations, and lifestyle expectations that maintained order while providing opportunities for social advancement through military service, commercial success, or religious achievement. These social distinctions influenced everything from housing location to clothing styles, while creating complex networks of obligation and reciprocity that maintained community stability. Daily routines for most residents involved early rising for market activities, craft production, or administrative duties, with community life centered around local temples where residents participated in religious ceremonies while receiving information about community affairs and imperial policies. These local religious centers served both spiritual functions and practical functions as neighborhood administrative centers and social gathering places. The market system that operated throughout Tenochtitlan provided residents with access to goods from throughout the empire, while creating employment opportunities for thousands of people involved in production, transportation, and commercial activities. These markets featured sophisticated systems of standardized weights, measures, and currencies, while maintaining quality controls that protected consumers and ensured fair exchanges. Food production and distribution in the city relied on the famous Chinampa system that provided fresh vegetables, fruits, and flowers, while supporting aquaculture that supplied fish, waterfowl, and other protein sources. These floating gardens created one of the world's most productive agricultural systems, while providing attractive landscapes that enhanced urban beauty and environmental quality. Waste management systems maintained urban sanitation through organized collection and disposal of human waste that was transported to agricultural areas where it served as fertilizer, while preventing contamination of water supplies and residential areas. These systems, considered remarkably advanced by Spanish observers, contributed to the city's reputation for cleanliness and health. Water supply systems provided Tenochtitlan residents with access to fresh drinking water, transported from springs at Chapultepec through sophisticated aqueduct systems that maintained water quality while providing adequate supplies for the city's large population. These engineering works required constant maintenance while demonstrating imperial capabilities for major infrastructure projects. Education opportunities in Tenochtitlan included schools attached to temples and noble households that provided instruction in various subjects, including history, religion, military training, and craft skills, while preparing young people for adult roles within imperial society. These educational institutions maintained high standards while ensuring cultural continuity and administrative competence across generations. Transportation within the city relied primarily on canoes that navigated the extensive canal system, while providing efficient movement of people and goods throughout the urban area. These waterways created distinctive urban environments while enabling access to all parts of the city without the need for large animals or wheeled vehicles that were unknown in pre-Columbian America. Entertainment and cultural activities enriched urban life through festivals, athletic competitions, theatrical performances, and artistic displays that provided recreation while reinforcing cultural values and imperial ideology. The city's residents enjoyed access to sophisticated cultural productions that demonstrated imperial prosperity while maintaining traditional forms of artistic expression and community celebration. The Aztec Empire's sophisticated economic systems transformed Mesoamerica into an integrated commercial zone that facilitated the flow of goods, services, and cultural innovations across vast territories while concentrating unprecedented wealth in the imperial capital. These economic networks combined tribute extraction with voluntary trade relationships to create prosperity that supported urban development, artistic achievement, and imperial expansion throughout the 2 centuries of Aztec dominance. Tribute collection formed the backbone of the imperial economy, providing regular flows of goods from subject territories that included foodstuffs, raw materials, manufactured products, and luxury items that sustained urban populations while demonstrating imperial power. The systematic nature of tribute requirements, recorded in documents like the Codex Mendoza, reveals sophisticated administrative capabilities while providing detailed information about economic relationships throughout the empire. The tribute system required subject communities to provide specific quantities of designated goods according to regular schedules that accommodated local production capabilities while meeting imperial needs. These arrangements often built upon existing local specializations while encouraging production of particular goods that commanded high value in imperial markets or served essential functions for urban populations and imperial administration. Trade networks operated alongside tribute systems to create voluntary commercial relationships that provided additional economic opportunities while facilitating cultural exchange and technological innovation throughout the empire. These networks connected local markets with regional distribution centers, while enabling long-distance commerce that brought exotic goods from throughout Mesoamerica to imperial markets. The Poctica professional long-distance merchants served as the backbone of interregional trade while performing diplomatic and intelligence functions that supported imperial expansion and administrative efficiency. These specialized traders developed extensive knowledge of routes, products, and cultural practices while maintaining their own distinctive social organization and religious practices that enabled effective operation across cultural boundaries. Craft specialization reached unprecedented levels during the imperial period, creating professional categories of artisans who produced goods of extraordinary beauty and technical excellence while serving both local markets and imperial demand for luxury objects. These craftsmen included featherworkers, goldsmiths, sculptors, textile producers, and ceramic specialists who developed sophisticated techniques while maintaining traditional artistic standards. Featherwork represented one of the most prestigious Aztec artistic traditions, creating elaborate garments, shields, and decorative objects that combined technical virtuosity with stunning visual effects. Master featherworkers used thousands of individual feathers from tropical birds to create intricate designs that served both ceremonial functions and diplomatic purposes, while demonstrating imperial wealth and artistic sophistication. Goldsmithing and jewelry production created magnificent ornaments and ceremonial objects that celebrated imperial achievements while demonstrating mastery of complex technical processes, including casting, hammering, and decorative techniques. Aztec goldsmiths developed innovative methods for creating hollow objects, intricate filigree work, and realistic representations that impressed Spanish conquistadors through their technical excellence and artistic beauty. Textile production included both utilitarian garments for daily use and elaborate ceremonial costumes that incorporated complex designs, expensive materials, and specialized techniques that reflected social status while providing appropriate dress for religious and political activities. The finest textiles featured intricate patterns created through sophisticated weaving techniques while incorporating feathers, precious metals, and rare dyes that enhanced their beauty and value. Market systems throughout the empire created standardized commercial institutions that facilitated exchange while maintaining quality controls and preventing fraud through systematic regulation and oversight. These markets featured designated areas for different categories of goods, while providing facilities for storage, security, and conflict resolution that enabled efficient commercial activities. Currency systems included cacao beans, quills filled with gold dust, and standardized textile pieces that served as media of exchange while enabling complex commercial transactions across the empire. These monetary systems required sophisticated understanding of value relationships while providing practical means for conducting business in markets where barter exchange would have been inefficient. Quality control systems maintained standards for manufactured goods while protecting consumers and ensuring that tribute requirements were met with appropriate products. These systems included specialized inspectors, standardized measures, and penalties for fraud that maintained commercial confidence while supporting the reputation of Aztec products in regional markets. Transportation networks supported commercial activities through maintained roads, way stations, and porter services that enabled efficient movement of goods across diverse geographical terrain. These systems required substantial investment in infrastructure while providing employment opportunities for thousands of people involved in transportation and related services. The final years of Aztec independence witnessed an unprecedented series of supernatural phenomena and prophetic interpretations that created profound anxiety throughout the empire while challenging traditional approaches to understanding divine will and cosmic stability. These omens, recorded in indigenous sources and Spanish chronicles, reflected both genuine environmental events and cultural frameworks for interpreting unusual occurrences within religious and political contexts that emphasized cosmic cycles and divine judgment. The appearance of unusual celestial phenomena during the decade preceding Spanish arrival included comets, unusual planetary configurations, and atmospheric effects that were interpreted through traditional divinatory systems, while creating widespread concern about impending cosmic changes. These astronomical events acquired particular significance within Aztec temporal frameworks that emphasized cyclical time and prophetic calendars that predicted major transformations at specific chronological intervals. The fire that mysteriously consumed the temple of Huitzilopochtli, without apparent cause, was interpreted as divine displeasure or warning, while creating practical concerns about the security of sacred spaces and ritual objects. This event challenged traditional understanding of divine protection, while requiring expensive reconstruction efforts that strained imperial resources during a period of increasing political and military pressures. The appearance of Moctezuma's sister, who claimed to have received divine visions warning of imperial destruction, created unprecedented challenges to royal authority, while introducing prophetic interpretations that contradicted official optimism about imperial security and divine favor. Her visions, which reportedly included detailed descriptions of bearded strangers arriving from the east, gained credibility through subsequent events that seemed to confirm prophetic accuracy. The birth of two-headed children and other unusual natural phenomena were interpreted within traditional frameworks of divine communication, while creating popular anxiety about cosmic stability and divine intentions toward the empire. These events, combined with other unusual occurrences, created cultural contexts for interpreting subsequent Spanish arrival as fulfillment of ancient prophecies rather than merely foreign invasion. The legend of Quetzalcoatl's promised return provided interpretive frameworks for understanding Spanish arrival, while creating theological dilemmas about appropriate responses to beings who might represent divine authority. This mythological tradition, involving the departure of the feathered serpent god and his promise to return from the east, influenced initial Aztec responses to Spanish expeditionaries, while complicating military and diplomatic decision-making. The dreams and visions reported by various individuals throughout the empire created networks of prophetic interpretation that challenged official assessments of imperial security while providing alternative frameworks for understanding current events and future possibilities. These visionary experiences, validated through traditional religious authorities, contributed to popular anxiety while undermining confidence in traditional political and military institutions. The appearance of unusual animals and natural phenomena, including two-headed serpents and other creatures that violated normal natural patterns, were interpreted as divine signs while creating practical concerns about environmental stability and agricultural productivity. These events, documented in various indigenous sources, reflected both genuine natural variations and cultural sensitivity to environmental changes that might indicate supernatural intervention. Divination practices conducted by imperial priests yielded increasingly ominous interpretations, while failing to provide clear guidance about appropriate responses to emerging threats and challenges. Traditional divinatory systems involving calendar calculations, ritual observations, and supernatural communications seemed inadequate for addressing unprecedented situations that challenged conventional wisdom about imperial security and divine protection. The failure of traditional ritual activities to prevent or resolve unusual phenomena created crises of religious confidence, while challenging priestly authority and traditional approaches to maintaining divine favor. Increased sacrificial activities and elaborate ceremonies failed to eliminate ominous signs, while exhausting imperial resources and creating popular anxiety about the effectiveness of traditional religious institutions. Popular interpretations of omens and prophecies created alternative explanations for current events, while undermining official confidence and imperial morale during crucial periods when unity and determination were essential for maintaining political stability and military effectiveness. These alternative interpretations, spreading through informal communication networks, challenged imperial propaganda while creating expectations of dramatic changes that would transform existing political and social arrangements. The psychological impact of prophetic expectations influenced both elite and popular responses to subsequent Spanish activities, while creating self-fulfilling prophecies that undermined imperial resistance and facilitated foreign conquest. The widespread belief that current events represented fulfillment of ancient prophecies rather than merely foreign invasion contributed to political paralysis and military hesitation that proved catastrophic for imperial survival. The Spanish conquest of the Aztec Empire represents one of history's most dramatic cultural collisions, involving the confrontation between two sophisticated civilizations with fundamentally different approaches to warfare, religion, and political organization. This conflict, lasting nearly 3 years, would ultimately destroy the political independence of the most powerful indigenous American empire, while creating cultural syntheses that continue to influence Mexican society today. The technological disparities between Spanish and indigenous forces created initial advantages for European military capabilities, while revealing the limitations of technological superiority when confronting determined resistance by numerically superior opponents. Spanish steel weapons, firearms, and horses provided tactical advantages in open warfare, but these technological benefits proved less decisive in urban combat and siege conditions, where indigenous defenders could neutralize European advantages through superior knowledge of local terrain and innovative tactical adaptations. The psychological impact of European appearance and technology initially disrupted indigenous resistance efforts while creating interpretive challenges related to religious beliefs and cultural expectations about supernatural intervention. The sight of mounted conquistadors, the sound of gunfire, and the unfamiliarity of European military tactics created temporary advantages for Spanish forces, while indigenous communities struggled to develop effective responses to unprecedented military challenges. The role of interpreters and cultural intermediaries proved crucial for both military operations and diplomatic negotiations, with individuals like Malinche Doña Marina providing essential communication services while navigating complex loyalties and cultural expectations. These intermediaries possessed unique knowledge of both Spanish and indigenous cultures, while occupying ambiguous positions that required constant adaptation to changing political and military circumstances. The epidemic diseases that accompanied Spanish arrival created demographic catastrophe that undermined indigenous military capabilities while disrupting social institutions and cultural practices essential for resistance coordination. Smallpox, typhus, and other Old World pathogens spread rapidly through indigenous populations that lacked natural immunity, creating mortality rates that approached 90% in some communities, while eliminating crucial leadership and expertise necessary for sustained resistance efforts. The political complexities of the conquest involved multiple indigenous groups with different motivations and objectives, while creating shifting alliance patterns that reflected both traditional rivalries and calculations about potential benefits from Spanish victory. The Tlacaelels, traditional enemies of the Aztecs, provided essential military support for Spanish forces while expecting territorial gains and political advantages that would enhance their position relative to other indigenous groups. The siege warfare that characterized the final phase of the conquest required sophisticated logistical coordination while demonstrating both Spanish determination and indigenous resilience in defending their homeland against foreign invasion. The siege of Tenochtitlan involved coordinated attacks from multiple directions while utilizing both European siege techniques and indigenous knowledge of local geography and defensive capabilities. The destruction of Tenochtitlan represented not only military defeat, but cultural catastrophe that eliminated one of the world's most magnificent cities, while destroying libraries, temples, and artistic treasures that represented centuries of cultural achievement. Spanish forces and their indigenous allies systematically demolished Aztec architecture while looting precious objects and destroying religious artifacts that represented essential elements of indigenous cultural identity and historical memory. The capture and execution of indigenous leaders eliminated traditional authority structures while creating political vacuum that enabled Spanish colonial administration to establish new governmental institutions based on European models. The death of Cuauhtémoc, the last Aztec emperor, symbolized the end of indigenous political independence, while demonstrating Spanish unwillingness to accommodate traditional authority structures within colonial arrangements. The transformation of indigenous society following conquest involved systematic destruction of traditional institutions while imposing Spanish legal, religious, and economic systems that disrupted established social relationships and cultural practices. Colonial policies aimed at cultural assimilation and religious conversion created additional challenges for indigenous survival, while providing limited opportunities for adaptation and integration within colonial society. The preservation of indigenous knowledge and cultural practices, despite systematic colonial suppression, demonstrated remarkable resilience and cultural creativity that enabled essential elements of Aztec civilization to survive within transformed social and political contexts. Indigenous communities developed strategies for maintaining traditional practices while accommodating colonial requirements, creating cultural syntheses that preserved essential identity while adapting to new circumstances. Hernán Cortés arrived on the Mexican coast in February 1519 with approximately 600 men, 16 horses, and several cannons, beginning an expedition that would evolve from commercial exploration into territorial conquest through a combination of military skill, diplomatic manipulation, and fortunate circumstances that enabled a small European force to overcome an empire of millions. His initial activities involved establishing coastal settlements while gathering intelligence about interior political conditions and potential allies. The political fragmentation that characterized central Mexico at the time of Spanish arrival created opportunities for foreign intervention while providing Cortés with potential allies among indigenous groups who resented Aztec domination and tribute requirements. The resentment of subject peoples toward imperial authority would prove crucial for Spanish military success, while demonstrating the limitations of imperial integration strategies that relied primarily on military force and tribute extraction rather than cultural assimilation. The initial encounter between Cortés and Moctezuma in November 1519 reflected the complex interpretive challenges created by cultural difference and prophetic expectations that influenced both sides' understanding of appropriate behavior and likely outcomes. Moctezuma's decision to welcome the Spanish as honored guests rather than confront them as military threats reflected both diplomatic tradition and religious uncertainty about their supernatural status. The Spanish seizure of Moctezuma in his own palace represented a diplomatic revolution that violated all traditional protocols while demonstrating European willingness to employ tactics that indigenous political culture found incomprehensible and morally unacceptable. This action, which effectively made the emperor a prisoner while maintaining the fiction of his continued authority, revealed fundamental differences in approaches to political legitimacy and diplomatic relations. The massacre at the Great Temple during the festival of Tlacaelel in May 1520 eliminated any possibility of peaceful accommodation while demonstrating Spanish inability to understand or respect indigenous religious practices. This unprovoked attack on unarmed ceremonial participants created permanent hostility while revealing the religious motivations underlying Spanish colonial policies that sought to eliminate indigenous spiritual traditions. The death of Moctezuma in June 1520, whether from wounds inflicted by stones thrown by his own people or from Spanish violence, eliminated the primary indigenous leader capable of negotiating political accommodation while creating succession crises that complicated resistance efforts. His death symbolized the breakdown of traditional political institutions while creating opportunities for new leadership that would adopt more militant approaches to foreign invasion. The Spanish retreat from Tenochtitlan during the Noche Triste Sad Night of June-July 1520 demonstrated indigenous military capabilities while revealing Spanish vulnerability to coordinated resistance efforts. This tactical victory for the Aztecs provided opportunities to expel foreign invaders while revealing that European military technology could be overcome through numerical superiority and strategic planning. The siege of Tenochtitlan from May to August 1521 represented the final military confrontation between indigenous and Spanish forces, involving coordinated attacks by Spanish troops and their indigenous allies against desperate defenders who lacked adequate supplies, reinforcements, or military options. This prolonged siege demonstrated both Spanish determination and indigenous courage while creating humanitarian catastrophe that eliminated much of the city's population. The role of disease in Spanish victory cannot be underestimated, with smallpox and other Old World pathogens creating demographic catastrophe that undermined indigenous military capabilities, while providing Spanish forces with overwhelming advantages in personnel and logistics. These epidemic diseases, to which indigenous populations lacked natural immunity, killed millions of people while disrupting political institutions and cultural traditions essential for resistance efforts. The contributions of indigenous allies, particularly the Tlacaelels, who provided essential military support and local knowledge, proved crucial for Spanish success, while demonstrating the political divisions that weakened indigenous resistance to foreign invasion. These alliances, motivated by both traditional rivalries and expectations of benefits from Spanish victory, provided military personnel and logistical support that enabled European conquest despite enormous numerical disadvantages. The fall of Tenochtitlan on August 13th, 1521, marked the end of indigenous political independence in central Mexico while beginning colonial processes that would transform both indigenous and Spanish cultures through centuries of interaction, conflict, and synthesis. This date represents one of the most significant moments in world history, ending the political independence of the most sophisticated indigenous American civilization, while initiating colonial relationships that would influence cultural development throughout the Americas. The conquest of the Aztec Empire initiated cultural transformations that continue to influence Mexican society 5 centuries later, creating complex syntheses of indigenous and European traditions while maintaining distinctive elements of Aztec civilization within modern national identity and cultural practices. The legacy of the Aztecs extends far beyond their immediate historical period, encompassing contributions to art, architecture, cuisine, language, and political symbolism that remain fundamental aspects of Mexican culture today. Colonial transformation of Aztec territories involved systematic destruction of indigenous political institutions, while creating new social hierarchies that combined Spanish administrative concepts with indigenous population management strategies. The encomienda system granted Spanish colonists control over indigenous labor, while theoretically protecting native populations, though in practice these arrangements often resulted in exploitation and cultural suppression that challenged indigenous survival and adaptation. The demographic catastrophe that followed conquest created population decline of unprecedented magnitude, with indigenous populations reduced by as much as 90% in some regions through disease, warfare, forced labor, and social disruption. This demographic collapse eliminated entire communities while disrupting cultural transmission, religious practices, and traditional knowledge systems that had been maintained across centuries of indigenous development. The recovery of indigenous populations required centuries of adaptation and cultural reconstruction that involved creative synthesis of traditional and colonial elements. The syncretism of religious traditions created distinctive Mexican Catholic practices that incorporated indigenous ceremonial elements while maintaining Christian theological frameworks, resulting in religious expressions like the veneration of the Virgin of Guadalupe that combined Aztec goddess imagery with Catholic Marian devotion. These syncretic traditions enabled indigenous communities to preserve essential spiritual elements while accommodating Spanish religious requirements and colonial social pressures. The architectural legacy of Aztec civilization manifested in colonial and post-colonial building traditions that incorporated indigenous design principles, construction techniques, and aesthetic preferences within European architectural frameworks. Colonial churches often occupied sites of former Aztec temples while incorporating indigenous craftsmanship and decorative elements that maintained visual connections with pre-Columbian traditions. This architectural synthesis created distinctively Mexican building traditions that influenced construction practices throughout the colonial period and beyond. Language preservation efforts have maintained Nahuatl as a living language spoken by over 1 million people today, while Nahuatl loanwords in Spanish and English demonstrate the continuing influence of Aztec linguistic contributions to international vocabulary. Words like chocolate, tomato, coyote, and hundreds of others derive from Nahuatl origins while connecting contemporary speakers with indigenous heritage and cultural knowledge. The persistence of indigenous place names throughout Mexico reflects the continuing influence of Nahuatl geographic terminology, while maintaining connections with pre-Columbian territorial understanding and cultural geography. Cities like Mexico, Guadalajara, originally Tonalá, and thousands of smaller communities retain indigenous names that preserve linguistic heritage while connecting contemporary inhabitants with ancestral cultural traditions. Culinary traditions rooted in Aztec food systems continue to define Mexican cuisine through ingredients, preparation techniques, and flavor combinations that originated in pre-Columbian kitchens while adapting to include Old World ingredients and cooking methods. Traditional foods like corn tortillas, chocolate beverages, chili peppers, and complex sauces maintain direct connections with Aztec culinary innovations while serving as foundations for contemporary Mexican gastronomy. The preservation of indigenous agricultural techniques, particularly Chinampa's cultivation in the Valley of Mexico, demonstrates the continuing relevance of Aztec environmental management systems while providing sustainable approaches to food production that address contemporary ecological challenges. Modern agricultural research increasingly recognizes the value of indigenous farming techniques for maintaining soil fertility, preserving biodiversity, and adapting to climate change through traditional knowledge systems. Medical traditions derived from Aztec healing practices continue to influence contemporary Mexican folk medicine while contributing to international pharmaceutical research that investigates indigenous plant knowledge for developing new therapeutic compounds. Traditional healers, known as curanderos, maintain knowledge of medicinal plants and healing practices that originated in pre-Columbian medical systems while adapting to contemporary health needs and medical understanding. Artistic traditions inspired by Aztec achievements continue to influence Mexican painters, sculptors, and craftsmen who draw inspiration from indigenous iconography, techniques, and aesthetic principles while creating contemporary works that celebrate cultural heritage and national identity. The Mexican mural movement of the 20th century particularly emphasized indigenous themes while asserting cultural nationalism and social justice concerns rooted in pre-Columbian achievements. The continuing production of traditional crafts including featherwork, jade carving, and textile production maintains artisanal skills developed during the Imperial period while providing economic opportunities for indigenous communities and preserving cultural knowledge for future generations. These craft traditions serve both economic and cultural functions while maintaining connections with ancestral artistic knowledge and aesthetic preferences. Political symbolism derived from Aztec imagery provides powerful representations of Mexican national identity through the eagle and serpent emblem that adorns the national flag, while connecting contemporary political institutions with indigenous heritage and territorial claims. This symbolism asserts cultural continuity while challenging colonial legacies that portrayed indigenous civilizations as inferior or obsolete. The integration of indigenous symbols into national iconography reflects broader processes of cultural reclamation that seek to incorporate pre-Columbian achievements into contemporary Mexican identity, while challenging European-derived concepts of civilization and cultural value. This symbolic integration provides frameworks for understanding Mexican history that emphasize indigenous contributions while acknowledging the complex legacies of conquest and colonization. Archaeological research continues to reveal new information about Aztec civilization while providing modern Mexican communities with enhanced understanding of their cultural heritage and historical achievements. Sites like the Templo Mayor in Mexico City attract millions of visitors annually while serving as symbols of indigenous achievement and cultural survival that challenge stereotypes about pre-Columbian American societies. Museum exhibitions and cultural programs throughout Mexico and internationally provide opportunities for public education about Aztec civilization while creating appreciation for indigenous achievements and cultural sophistication. These educational initiatives challenge colonial-era stereotypes while providing contemporary communities with enhanced understanding of indigenous contributions to human knowledge and cultural development. Educational initiatives promoting indigenous knowledge and cultural appreciation have created new opportunities for preserving traditional practices while integrating indigenous perspectives into academic curricula and cultural programs. These efforts challenge colonial educational approaches while providing contemporary communities with enhanced understanding of indigenous contributions to human knowledge and cultural development. The establishment of indigenous universities and research centers has created new opportunities for indigenous scholars to conduct research on their own cultural traditions while developing academic expertise that enables them to challenge non-indigenous interpretations of pre-Columbian history and culture. These institutions combine traditional knowledge with modern academic methods, while training new generations of indigenous scholars who can represent indigenous perspectives in international academic and political forums. Tourism related to Aztec sites and cultural heritage generates significant economic benefits for Mexican communities while creating international appreciation for indigenous achievements and cultural sophistication. Museums, archaeological sites, and cultural programs provide employment opportunities while preserving historical knowledge and promoting cross-cultural understanding that enhances both tourism experiences and community development. The development of cultural tourism initiatives that emphasize indigenous heritage and contemporary cultural practices provides alternatives to traditional tourism models while ensuring that indigenous communities benefit more directly from international interest in their cultural traditions. These community-based tourism projects often emphasize educational components that promote more accurate understanding of contemporary indigenous culture while providing income for cultural preservation activities. Environmental knowledge preserved from Aztec agricultural and ecological management systems continues to influence contemporary sustainability efforts, while providing practical solutions for current environmental challenges. Traditional techniques like Chinampas agriculture, integrated crop management, and watershed conservation offer models for sustainable development that balance human needs with environmental protection and cultural preservation. Contemporary environmental movements in Mexico increasingly draw inspiration from indigenous ecological knowledge while advocating for conservation policies that recognize indigenous territorial rights and traditional environmental management practices. These movements combine environmental protection with cultural preservation while asserting indigenous authority over traditional territories and natural resources. Cultural festivals and celebrations throughout Mexico maintain traditional elements derived from Aztec ceremonial cycles while adapting ancient practices to contemporary social contexts and religious requirements. These events provide opportunities for community building while preserving cultural knowledge and artistic traditions that connect contemporary communities with indigenous heritage and historical achievements. The continuing celebration of indigenous festivals, like the Day of the Dead, demonstrates the persistence of pre-Columbian religious concepts within contemporary Mexican culture, while providing occasions for cultural expression and community solidarity that maintain connections with ancestral traditions. These celebrations combine indigenous and Catholic elements while creating distinctively Mexican cultural expressions that attract international attention and appreciation. International influence of Aztec civilization extends beyond Mexico through scholarly research, museum exhibitions, and popular culture representations that continue to fascinate audiences worldwide while contributing to global understanding of indigenous American achievements and cultural diversity. These international connections enhance appreciation for human cultural creativity while challenging ethnocentric assumptions about civilization and historical development. The global interest in Aztec astronomy, mathematics, and calendar systems reflects contemporary appreciation for indigenous scientific achievements while providing inspiration for alternative approaches to understanding time, cosmos, and human relationships with natural systems. Aztec calendar concepts particularly attract international attention through their integration of astronomical observation with cultural and religious practices that offer alternatives to purely secular approaches to timekeeping and historical understanding. The contemporary renaissance of indigenous rights and cultural assertion in Mexico draws inspiration from Aztec achievements, while advocating for political recognition and cultural preservation that acknowledges indigenous contributions to national development and cultural identity. These movements combine historical pride with contemporary political action while asserting indigenous rights to territorial, cultural, and political autonomy within modern nation-state frameworks. Modern Mexico City, built upon the ruins of Tenochtitlan, maintains physical and cultural connections with its indigenous heritage while serving as one of the world's largest urban centers and a testimony to the continuing influence of Aztec urban planning principles and lacustrine adaptation strategies. The city's continued existence in the same location demonstrates both the appropriateness of the original site selection and the persistence of urban traditions across centuries of political and cultural change. Contemporary urban planning in Mexico City increasingly acknowledges its indigenous heritage while seeking solutions to contemporary challenges that draw inspiration from Aztec water management, transportation systems, and urban organization principles. The rediscovery of Aztec engineering techniques provides potential solutions for modern urban challenges while connecting contemporary urban development with indigenous technological achievements. Academic research on Aztec civilization continues to enhance understanding of pre-Columbian American achievements, while providing contemporary scholars with insights into alternative approaches to political organization, environmental management, and cultural integration that remain relevant for addressing current global challenges. These scholarly investigations contribute to broader understanding of human social development while preserving knowledge about indigenous innovations and cultural achievements. International academic collaboration between Mexican and foreign researchers has created new opportunities for advancing Aztec studies while ensuring that indigenous perspectives and communities benefit from research conducted on their cultural heritage. These collaborative relationships demonstrate respectful approaches to cross-cultural research while maintaining indigenous authority over cultural representation and historical interpretation. The story of the Aztecs ultimately represents both the magnificent achievements and tragic vulnerabilities of human civilization, demonstrating how complex societies can create remarkable cultural and political innovations while remaining subject to historical forces beyond their control. Their legacy reminds us that cultural achievement transcends political survival, and that indigenous knowledge and traditions continue to enrich human civilization long after the specific political institutions that created them have disappeared. The eagle that once soared over Lake Texcoco continues to fly in the hearts and minds of millions of people who find inspiration in Aztec achievements, while working to create contemporary societies that honor both indigenous heritage and modern opportunities for human development and cultural expression. The sun that once received tribute from Aztec subjects continues to shine upon descendants who maintain connections with ancestral wisdom, while adapting to contemporary challenges and opportunities that require both innovation and cultural continuity. In studying the Aztecs, we study ourselves, our capacity for both creation and destruction, our ability to build magnificent civilizations while remaining vulnerable to forces beyond our control, and our responsibility to honor cultural achievements while learning from historical tragedies that remind us of the precious fragility of human civilization and the essential importance of preserving cultural diversity for future generations who will inherit both our achievements and our failures. The Aztec legacy teaches us that human greatness lies not only in the monuments we build or the territories we conquer, but in the wisdom we preserve, the beauty we create, and the cultural traditions we maintain across the centuries of change that define the human experience. Colonial transformation of Aztec territories involved systematic destruction of indigenous political institutions while creating new social hierarchies that combined Spanish administrative concepts with indigenous population management strategies. The encomienda system granted Spanish colonists control over indigenous labor while theoretically protecting native populations, though in practice these arrangements often resulted in exploitation and cultural suppression that challenged indigenous survival and adaptation. The syncretism of religious traditions created distinctive Mexican Catholic practices that incorporated indigenous ceremonial elements while maintaining Christian theological frameworks, resulting in religious expressions like the veneration of the Virgin of Guadalupe that combined Aztec goddess imagery with Catholic Marian devotion. These syncretic traditions enabled indigenous communities to preserve essential spiritual elements while accommodating Spanish religious requirements and colonial social pressures. Architectural influences from the Aztec period continue to inspire Mexican builders and designers who incorporate indigenous design elements into contemporary structures while maintaining connections with pre-Columbian aesthetic traditions. The monumental scale, geometric patterns, and symbolic programs that characterized Aztec architecture influenced modern Mexican public buildings while providing visual connections with indigenous heritage and national identity. Language preservation efforts have maintained Nahuatl as a living language spoken by over 1 million people today, while Nahuatl loanwords in Spanish and English demonstrate the continuing influence of Aztec linguistic contributions to international vocabulary. Words like chocolate, tomato, coyote, and hundreds of others derive from Nahuatl origins, while connecting contemporary speakers with indigenous heritage and cultural knowledge. Culinary traditions rooted in Aztec food systems continue to define Mexican cuisine through ingredients, preparation techniques, and flavor combinations that originated in pre-Columbian kitchens while adapting to include Old World ingredients and cooking methods. Traditional foods like corn tortillas, chocolate beverages, chili peppers, and complex sauces maintain direct connections with Aztec culinary innovations while serving as foundations for contemporary Mexican gastronomy. Artistic traditions inspired by Aztec achievements continue to influence Mexican painters, sculptors, and craftsmen who draw inspiration from indigenous iconography, techniques, and aesthetic principles while creating contemporary works that celebrate cultural heritage and national identity. The Mexican mural movement of the 20th century particularly emphasized indigenous themes while asserting cultural nationalism and social justice concerns rooted in pre-Columbian achievements. Political symbolism derived from Aztec imagery provides powerful representations of Mexican national identity through the eagle and serpent emblem that adorns the national flag, while connecting contemporary political institutions with indigenous heritage and territorial claims. This symbolism asserts cultural continuity while challenging colonial legacies that portrayed indigenous civilizations as inferior or obsolete. Archaeological research continues to reveal new information about Aztec civilization while providing modern Mexican communities with enhanced understanding of their cultural heritage and historical achievements. Sites like the Templo Mayor in Mexico City attract millions of visitors annually while serving as symbols of indigenous achievement and cultural survival that challenge stereotypes about pre-Columbian American societies. Educational initiatives promoting indigenous knowledge and cultural appreciation have created new opportunities for preserving traditional practices while integrating indigenous perspectives into academic curricula and cultural programs. These efforts challenge colonial educational approaches while providing contemporary communities with enhanced understanding of indigenous contributions to human knowledge and cultural development. Tourism related to Aztec sites and cultural heritage generates significant economic benefits for Mexican communities while creating international appreciation for indigenous achievements and cultural sophistication. Museums, archaeological sites, and cultural programs provide employment opportunities while preserving historical knowledge and promoting cross-cultural understanding that enhances both tourism experiences and community development. Environmental knowledge preserved from Aztec agricultural and ecological management systems continues to influence contemporary sustainability efforts while providing practical solutions for current environmental challenges. Traditional techniques like Chinampas agriculture, integrated crop management, and watershed conservation offer models for sustainable development that balance human needs with environmental protection and cultural preservation. Cultural festivals and celebrations throughout Mexico maintain traditional elements derived from Aztec ceremonial cycles, while adapting ancient practices to contemporary social contexts and religious requirements. These events provide opportunities for community building while preserving cultural knowledge and artistic traditions that connect contemporary communities with indigenous heritage and historical achievements. International influence of Aztec civilization extends beyond Mexico through scholarly research, museum exhibitions, and popular culture representations that continue to fascinate audiences worldwide, while contributing to global understanding of indigenous American achievements and cultural diversity. These international connections enhance appreciation for human cultural creativity, while challenging ethnocentric assumptions about civilization and historical development. The contemporary renaissance of indigenous rights and cultural assertion in Mexico draws inspiration from Aztec achievements, while advocating for political recognition and cultural preservation that acknowledges indigenous contributions to national development and cultural identity. These movements combine historical pride with contemporary political action while asserting indigenous rights to territorial, cultural, and political autonomy within modern nation-state frameworks. Modern Mexico City, built upon the ruins of Tenochtitlan, maintains physical and cultural connections with its indigenous heritage while serving as one of the world's largest urban centers and a testimony to the continuing influence of Aztec urban planning principles and lacustrine adaptation strategies. The city's continued existence in the same location demonstrates both the appropriateness of the original site selection and the persistence of urban traditions across centuries of political and cultural change. Academic research on Aztec civilization continues to enhance understanding of pre-Columbian American achievements, while providing contemporary scholars with insights into alternative approaches to political organization, environmental management, and cultural integration that remain relevant for addressing current global challenges. These scholarly investigations contribute to broader understanding of human social development, while preserving knowledge about indigenous innovations and cultural achievements. The story of the Aztecs ultimately represents both the magnificent achievements and tragic vulnerabilities of human civilization, demonstrating how complex societies can create remarkable cultural and political innovations while remaining subject to historical forces beyond their control. Their legacy reminds us that cultural achievement transcends political survival, and that indigenous knowledge and traditions continue to enrich human civilization long after the specific political institutions that created them have disappeared. The eagle that once soared over Lake Texcoco continues to fly in the hearts and minds of millions of people who find inspiration in Aztec achievements while working to create contemporary societies that honor both indigenous heritage and modern opportunities for human development and cultural expression. The sun that once received tribute from Aztec subjects continues to shine upon descendants who maintain connections with ancestral wisdom while adapting to contemporary challenges and opportunities that require both innovation and cultural continuity. In studying the Aztecs, we study ourselves, our capacity for both creation and destruction, our ability to build magnificent civilizations while remaining vulnerable to forces beyond our control, and our responsibility to honor cultural achievements while learning from historical tragedies that remind us of the precious fragility of human civilization and the essential importance of preserving cultural diversity for future generations who will inherit both our achievements and our failures.